take a look at Domain 5, Task 3. Demonstrate the financial impacts of resource-based relative value scale, or RBRVS. Does anybody know what an RBRVS is? Type your answers in the chat if you know what it is. Yes, someone said calculating physician or provider payments. Indeed, it is. In this case, we're talking about physicians and facilities, how to calculate payments. All right, so now we have a lecture. Well, it's a video. Do it. Let's go ahead and let's do it. So, what is a relative value-based reimbursement system? Well, there's your hint. You got a hint. Okay, people are stumped on this one. Essentially, this is how doctors get paid, right? This is generally the system that is used to calculate payments. They use that calculator over there, see? Let's go back. Let's go back. So they use three key components. Exactly. So you guys are just rocking it in the chat. So we're going to put it all together. All right. So there are three key components, but I'm going to discuss all of the variables to calculate these provider payments. All right. So one of the variables is the work expense, or the WE. This reflects the physician's time, skill, training, and intensity needed to provide a service. Another variable is what we call practice expense, and or PE, and this can be for a non-facility or a facility, and this variable accounts for the overhead cost like staff wages, equipment, and supplies. Number 3, malpractice expense. The ME, this covers the cost of malpractice insurance. Here's another variable someone just mentioned, the geographic practice cost index, the GPCI. This is the cost, or how much it costs to practice in that geographic area. So you get a little, each geographic area gets a specific amount. New York is going to be higher than North Carolina, as an example. And finally, another variable. This is the conversion factor. This is the number of dollars or units assigned to an RVU. All right, so we need a WE, a PE, and an ME. These three. These are the three main variables that we need. Okay, my on clicks are off. Sorry, I tried to do something new. And all of the variables are provided by CMS. However, the WE, the PE, and the ME are the main three. That is where we focus. And why? Because we need an RVU. So we need the RVU for the work expense, the practice expense, and the malpractice expense. So we have to convert it to an RVU. And an RVU is the abbreviation for relative value unit. An RVU is one element used in that formula, that VBRS formula for calculating provider payments. So once we establish these RVUs for the WE, PE, and the ME, it's just a matter of multiplying it by the conversion factor. Then we will get our provider payment. So in other words, here is the formula to obtain an RVU. In order to get an RVU for the work expense, you take that work expense number and you multiply it by the GPCI. And earlier I said the GPCI is the Geographic Practice Cost Index. We do the same for the PE. We'll multiply that number for the practice expense by the GPCI. We'll do the same for the malpractice expense and multiply it by the GPCI. Then we add them together and we get our RVU. And once we get the RVU, we'll multiply it by the conversion factor. And that will produce our payment. Okay, coders, are you with me? A little bit? All righty. All right. So next, this is how it's done. So I kind of told you how it was done and there were words. Now I'm going to give you a visual. We said that the WEPE and the ME were significant in determining what the RVUs, right? So your work expense multiplied the GPCI will give you the work expense RVU. The practice expense multiplied by the GPCI will give you the practice expense RVU. The malpractice expense multiplied by the GPCI will give you the malpractice expense RVU. Then you'll add all of the RVUs to get your total RVU. And then you take that number and multiply it by the conversion factor. So in sum, your formula to acquire or get a payment is your RVU times the conversion factor. And that will give you your RVBRS. So here's your steps. Step 1, determine the RVU for WEPE and ME, then multiply them by the GPCI. Step 2, add all of the RVUs together to get your total RVU. And step 3, multiply the RVU by the conversion factor. Now let's try it. We are going to calculate getting an RVU for hysterectomy surgery. Now, these numbers are made up, but the formula is how we're going to do it. All right, so these are our steps here. Determine the RVUs, multiply them by the GPCI, add them together, multiply the sum by the conversion factor. Sum means add. Multiply the addition. Multiply the the answer after you added them together by the conversion factor. All right. So now Here we go. I'm going to give you all of the variables, and in the real world and on the exam, you will be given all of the variables. All right, so we have predetermined Medicare payments based on the locality of the practice or provider. And we need to determine the RVBRS. If the GPCI equals 1.0 and the conversion factor is 1,000. Now we need to determine the payment for a doctor performing a hysterectomy. So we are going to determine the doctor payment. And as you can see, the work expense is 6. The practice expense for non-facilities is 12. The practice expense for a facility is 2. And the malpractice expense is 3. Now we only have to add 3 of these. 1 does not belong. Can anybody tell me which one does not belong? Which one of these variables? This work expense, practice expense non-facility, practice expense facility, practice expense for, malpractice expense. For our, yeah. So we are determining the payment for a doctor. So if we're determining the payment for a doctor, we do not need a facility, right? Right, it's not a facility, it's a non-facility. So let's get rid of it. Are you with me? Okay, so a doctor falls under non-facility. Now let's get calculating. So if the work expense is 6, in order to get the work expense RVU, we have to multiply the work expense by what number? Go ahead and type in the chat. Good deal. Good deal. That's right. That's right. Look at them. You have to multiply it by the GPCI, right? The geographic price cost index. So 1.03 times 6 equals 6.18. What are we going to multiply the practice expense for non-facility of the number of 12? What are we going to multiply it by? That's right. You guys are rocking. Indeed, indeed, the GPCI. Here's the GPCI. All right. So we're going to multiply this by 1.03 times 2 times 12, and that's 12.36. Let's go ahead and put it down here. We're going to bypass the facility practice expense, and we're going to go over to malpractice expense. And that number is 3, and we're going to multiply it by 1.03. That gives us 3.09. Okay, what do we do next? What do we do to get the total RVU for a doctor or this doctor carrying out a hysterectomy? That's right. Somebody said, add them together. Indeed. Right, add them together. 6.18 plus 12.36 plus 3.09. The answer is 21.63. Outstanding. I just want to make sure my I did my math is wrong. So let me go ahead and fix it. Somebody had that answer. Right, right, right. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and announce and say what the answer is, go ahead. The final answer. If you don't know, it's okay. Here we go. So the formula to get a payment of R using the RVBRS system you take your total RVU and multiply it by the conversion factor. Our conversion factor is 1,000. Yes. Yeah. So the payment for the surgeon to carry out a hysterectomy is $21,630. Okay, I told you that these numbers were made up. All right, so you all get it? Everybody get it? All right. All right. Got it. All right, so here, got another question. What is the RVU? If the GPCI is 1.03, oh, you know what? I didn't put the conversion factor. The conversion factor is 1,000. Sorry about that. So the GPCI is the same, but we need to determine the payment for a facility performing a hysterectomy. First things first, we're going to get rid of, we're going to X out the non-facility because we need the facility rate, and everything pretty much is the same. All right, so 1.03 times 6 is 6.18. We're going to skip the facility, the non-facility, and we are going to multiply 1.03 times 2, and that equals 2.06. And then the malpractice will be the same. 1.03 times 3, 3.09. Add them all together, and the total RVU for a facility, this is their payment for carrying out a hysterectomy. And I'm not going to get into it, but facilities get paid for the resources used to carry out that hysterectomy, the OR room, the scalpel, the nurse, anything that the hospital owns or pays for are the resources. All right, so it's 11.33, and the final answer, if the conversion factor is 1,000, we're going to take our total RVU of 11.33, and our answer, which is also the payment for the facility to carry out a hysterectomy, is 11,330. And that is how you do it. So how do you feel? Good. People say they got it. All right, I'm not finished. No, let's go ahead and relate this. Let's relate it to CPT. And for each CPT code, each of those three components, the WE, the PE, and the ME, an RVU is assigned. Yeah, so CMS does it. They assign a RVU for every single CPT code. So we have a scenario. And the question is, how much would a facility be reimbursed in total by CMS and the patient for removing a bladder stone in the emergency room? The patient requested his own physician in San Diego. So we're saying, how much would the facility be reimbursed? The patient had a lithopaxy, which is crushing or fragmentation of calculus by any means in the bladder, and removal of fragments, simple or small, less than 2.5 centimeters. All right, so if you look to the right, you have your work RVU, your non-facility practice expense, your facility practice expense, and your malpractice RVU. Now I'm going to show you how I do it, and then you will do the next one. All right? So the first thing I'm going to do is eliminate what is not applicable. And since we're working on the facility, I'm going to get rid of the non-facility practice expense. Next, I'm going to look for the GPCI, and below I see for San Diego Carlsbad, the GPCI for the practice, for the work, okay, for the work, the practice work is 1.032. For the practice expense, the facility practice expense, it's 1.130. And the malpractice expense is 0.607. So that's an observation. I'm also observing the conversion factor is $36.88. Now, I've got a multiple choice question. So what I'm going to do, because I see all of these potential problems, I'm taking an exam and I want to make sure that I'm not sidetracked. So what I do, I round up my answers to the nearest 10th. I do. And why do I do that? Because it helps me stay focused and I don't get caught up in the little things. I don't get caught up in the change. I don't get caught up if my numbers don't match. I'm already going in it. And I know when I round them up, like 104.38 is going to be 101.4. And any answer between 1014 and 1013 is going to be okay. My 812, any answer between 812 and 811 is going to be okay. C, 379 and 378 is good, and D, 303 and 302 will be sufficient. And sometimes people's calculations are different. Depends on your calculator. All right. Now, how do I solve this? I determine my RVUs, I multiply them by their GPCI, I add them all together, then I multiply the sum by the conversion factor. So let's get started. All right, that's gone. And I'm going to start with my work RVU. 6.71. I'm going to multiply it by the GPCI, the corresponding GPCI of 1.032. I'm going to add it to the next one, which will be the facility practice expense, which will be multiplied by its own GPCI, the practice expense. So 2.55 times 1.130. And then I'm going to add that to the malpractice RVU, which I'll multiply by the malpractice GPCI. And I'm going to tell you the answer that I got was 10.2796. How did you do that, Mrs. J? Well, let me show you how I broke it down. All right. 6.71 times 1.032 is 6.92. I added that to 2.55 times 1.130. My answer is 2.88. Then I added that to 0.78 times 0.607, and that's 4.7. So my answer technically could be, well, my answer, I'm going to leave it at 2. It could be 10.27, 10.279. Do you see how you can get all caught up? Let's go ahead and leave it. If I base it on this number here, if I base it on this number here, we'll be a little off, but it's okay. Remember, we rounded up our number. All right. So if we add them together, we're going to add, excuse me, if we add them together, I said it was 10.27, and I must have got that from my calculator. And the next thing I have to do is multiply it by the conversion factor, and the conversion factor is 36.88, right? And you add them, if you multiply them together, your answer, 379.00. C. C. That's my answer. All right. How are you, coders? Yeah, PW stands for practice work. Absolutely great question. Somebody said they're ready to rock and roll. Okay, you all can do it yourselves, and let's try it. And this is for the physician. Okay? All right, so I'll give you a couple of minutes if you want to try it on your own. And I'm just going to go ahead and X that out. Take it away. All right, someone said they forgot the conversion factor. It's right here. Okay, conversion factor is the same. All right. You all did an amazing job. Some of you were able to answer. Outstanding. But I am speaking a little more slow than I usually do, but I understand that we are learning, right? And I will pick it up as the weeks go. But this is how we do it. Okay, we've gotten rid of the facility. We're focusing on the doctor. Our conversion factor is 36.88. All right, now I'm going to round up my answers. A, 1003, B, 1014, C, 1005, and D, 1017. I rounded it up to the nearest tenth, and this is what I did. I multiplied my work RVU to my practice, my practice, my PW, okay, practice work or provider work RVU, and that's 1.032, 6.92. I multiplied the non-facility practice expense to the practice expense. Well, I multiplied with the practice expense GPCI, and that result was 19.80. I multiplied the malpractice RVU to the malpractice GPCI, and that product was 0.47. I added them, and the sum was 27.19. Then I took 27.19 and multiplied it by the conversion factor of 36.88, and my total is what you all said, $1,002.80. A. And this is the amount the facility will get. Okay, coders, you all rocked it. How do you feel? How do you feel? You feeling good? All right, all right, all right. So I feel sufficiently confident, but let me go ahead and summarize. So variables to calculate provider payments. Number one, the work expense. Number two, practice expense. Number three, malpractice expense. Then you take all three of those and multiply by their respective geographic price cost index, and you will get your RVU. After you get your RVUs for each, you add them up, and then you multiply by the conversion factor. And all of the variables are provided by CMS. Now, it's time to test your knowledge. Now, this is what you'll see on the exam, and you'll possibly see questions like the ones in the scenario, but I didn't see it, but you could, but you know how to calculate it. But for the most part, you'll need to know the following. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Miss Ida, please, and thank you.
All right. A, work value. B, professional liability insurance. C, marketplace value. D, practice expense. Which of the relative value units considers the cost of delivering healthcare service, such as overhead, salaries of workers, and equipment?
Good job, good job. And the answer is D, practice expense. This is the expense incurred by the practice, the overhead, the rent, the salaries of the workers, and the equipment. All right, next question.
A, national conversion factor. B, geographic practice cost indices. C, paradigm amount set by CMS. D, usual and customary fees for the HCPCS code. And calculating the fee for a provider's service, each of the three relative value units is multiplied by that.
They answered and they have said B, geographic price cost indices. Outstanding. All right.
A, malpractice expense. B, physician's work. C, practice expense. D, geographic practice cost indices. Under RBRVS, all the following are separate relative value units, RVUs, assigned for each CPT or HCPCS code except for.
Way to go. You all didn't get stumped by this one. The answer is D, geographic price cost indices. Now, this is our final.
A, geographic practice cost indices. B, pass-through payment. C, payment indicator. D, conversion factor. In RBRVs, this is an across the board national multiplier that is determined by CMS each year. It is the dollar amount that converts the relative value units into a payment amount.
Again, they nailed it. D, the conversion factor. Outstanding. Thank you so much, Miss Ida. Now, how do you feel, coders? Go ahead and type in the chat.
Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy coding.